Let's get started with our first big story, and it's already making some serious waves in the MMA world. Chael Sonnen has weighed in on what could happen if Du Plessis manages to pull off a win over Khamzat, and his take is nothing short of explosive. According to Chael, if Du Plessis can get it done, if he can walk into that cage, stare down one of the most feared men in the sport, and actually walk out with his hand raised, then we could be talking about a monumental shift in the pound-for-pound landscape, and we're not talking about a small bump in reputation, no. Chael says we could see Du Plessis break into the top 3 of the pound-for-pound rankings. That's right, top 3. Now that's not a throwaway statement. Coming from Chael, a guy who's been around this sport long enough to see careers built, crushed, and rebuilt again, this kind of prediction carries weight. He's not saying it just to hype the fight, he's saying it because in his eyes, the math checks out. Beat Khamzat, and you're not just another middleweight champ, you're sitting alongside Islam and Ilia in what Chael calls the elite territory of MMA right now. Chael broke it down in classic Sonnen fashion, blunt, direct, and with that signature mix of insight and showmanship. In this sport, he explained, respect is measured in stages. First you get the belt, then you get the main events, and then you get that little more. That little more is when your name becomes a permanent fixture in the conversations about the very best fighters alive, regardless of weight class. And according to Chael, for Du Plessis, that little more could very well be a top 3 pound-for-pound ranking. But Sonnen didn't stop there. He painted a picture of just how big this could be. A win over Khamzat wouldn't just be another line on Du Plessis' record. It wouldn't be something the MMA community could shrug off. No, this would be a statement win, the kind of win that forces every fan, every analyst, and every fighter in the game to look at Du Plessis in a completely different light. Chael made it clear this fight is a measuring stick. If Du Plessis shows up looking good, fighting smart, and executing a game plan that shuts down Khamzat, then his stock doesn't just go up, it skyrockets. This is the kind of moment where careers change forever, the kind of moment where people stop seeing you as just the champion and start seeing you as one of the most dangerous men walking the planet. And for Chael, that's the beauty of this sport. One night, one fight, one opponent can redefine everything. For Du Plessis, that opponent is Khamzat, and if he can get it done, we might just be talking about one of the biggest rankings shakeups in recent MMA history. Before moving to the next news, we have one quick request for you. We're constantly working on improving our content to earn your love and support. That's why we truly appreciate it if you could take just a moment to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Now moving on to our second news story, and this one comes straight from Henry Cejudo, who is not holding back when it comes to his thoughts on Alexander Volkanovski. Cejudo believes that Volkanovski's reign as featherweight champion is in serious danger, and he's already naming the men who he thinks could take that belt away. In Cejudo's eyes, the clock is ticking for Volkanovski. The division is evolving, new challengers are emerging, and the gap between the champ and the next wave of contenders is closing fast. And according to Henry, there are 2 names that stand out above the rest, Aaron Pico and Leon Murphy. Now these aren't just random picks. Cejudo isn't throwing out names for the sake of headlines. These 2 men are about to collide in the co-main event of UFC 319, and Henry is convinced that the winner will not only earn the next shot at Volkanovski, but will actually dethrone him. Henry starts off with his trademark politeness. All due respect, but make no mistake, his message is sharp. These younger, hungrier fighters aren't coming slowly. They're not waiting for the perfect opportunity. They're coming for that belt now. Cejudo broke down exactly why he thinks both Pico and Murphy are so dangerous. Starting with Aaron Pico, Henry says Pico is in the absolute prime of his career right now. This is a fighter with world-class wrestling that's been his foundation since high school, and it's not just good, it's off the charts. Pico's physicality, his explosiveness, and his relentless pressure are the kind of tools that can break an opponent mentally before the fight is even over. Cejudo points out that Pico was beating world champions before he was even out his teens, and that level of experience combined with youth and athleticism is a rare and lethal mix. Then you have Leon Murphy, a completely different animal. Murphy is undefeated, unpredictable, and highly adaptable. Cejudo says he's tricky in ways that you just can't prepare for. His style is part wrestling, part chaos, and that unpredictability can leave opponents scrambling to adjust mid-fight. Henry compared him to Murab, someone who's impossible to fully prepare for because you never know exactly what he's going to bring once the cage door closes. For Cejudo, this isn't just about who has the skills, it's about who has the hunger, and both of these men have it in abundance. He sees the co-main event of UFC 319 as possibly the most competitive fight on the entire card. It's the kind of matchup where you truly don't know who's gonna win until the final horn sounds. And if Henry's prediction comes true, the featherweight division could be looking at a completely different landscape before the year's over. That belt that Volkanovski has defended so fiercely could be strapped around the waist of a brand new champion, one who's younger, hungrier, and ready to define a new era at 145 pounds. Now let's shift gears to a fighter who never fails to grab headlines, Paddy Pimblett. And this time, he's making sure the MMA world is listening. Earlier today, Paddy set social media on fire when he posted a photo on Instagram with the caption, "Just waiting on that call, Elizzo. I'm coming for you," followed by a winking emoji. No subtlety, no guessing games. That's a direct shot at Ilia, and everyone knows it. But Paddy didn't stop there. On his YouTube channel, he went a step further, calling out not only Ilia, but also throwing some heavy shade at Arman. According to Paddy, Arman is irrelevant and desperate to fight Ilia. He says Arman is chasing clout, not glory, and claims nobody outside hardcore MMA circles even knows who he is. Now, here's where things get interesting. Paddy openly admits there are other fighters out there who on paper are probably more deserving of a title shot. He knows his current position, sitting at number 9 in the rankings, doesn't exactly scream next in line. But rankings aside, Paddy believes there's one thing you can't measure with numbers: fan demand. And according to him, the fans want him versus Ilia more than anything else right now. Paddy claims that every American fan he meets tells him the same thing: they want to see him smash Ilia. He says this fight has the potential to be massive, not just for the division, but for the UFC as a whole. The personalities, the trash talk, the build-up. It's the kind of matchup that writes itself. Still, Paddy knows wanting a fight and getting it are two different things. That's why he's not just relying on callouts. He's keeping the pressure on with a mix of humor, insults, and in classic Paddy fashion, a bit of chaos. He's been calling Ilia Posh Boy, mocking his attitude, and even throwing out the wild claim that Ilia is so desperate to make the fight happen that he'd be willing to offer £1 million to seal the deal. Paddy painted him as a spoiled rich baby who's trying to buy his way to the top instead of earning it. He didn't stop there. Paddy also took a dig at Ilia's past weight cut struggles, accusing him of quitting mid-cut when things got too tough. He says that's not the mentality of a champion, and he'd love to be the one to expose it inside the cage. And while he had plenty of heat for Ilia and Arman, Paddy made it clear there's at least one fighter he does respect. Justin Gaethje. He calls Gaethje a warrior, a man who never backs down. But even with that respect, Paddy says he's noticed Justin doesn't seem in a rush to fight him either. At the end of the day, Paddy says the fight that makes the most sense for him, for Ilia, for the fans, and for the UFC is him versus Ilia. Until that bout is signed, sealed, and delivered, Paddy Pimblett is going to keep calling, keep posting, keep stirring the pot, and keep making sure that when the UFC finally makes their decision, his name is at the top of the list. Switching over to another huge update, Charles Oliveira is officially set to face Raphael in the main event of UFC Rio on October 11th. This news dropped like a thunderclap in the MMA world, not just because of the matchup itself, but because of the time. Many fans immediately voiced concerns about how quickly Oliveira is coming back, considering he was knocked out in the first round by Ilia just this past June. That's a fast turnaround by any standard, especially after such a brutal loss. Some questioned whether it's too soon, whether his body and mind have fully recovered. But if you ask Charles, this is exactly what he wants. In a recent interview, Oliveira explained that after the Ilia fight, he allowed himself a brief moment to breathe. Not weeks, not months, just enough time to collect himself. Then, he was right back in the gym, sharpening his weapons with one clear mission: to come back better. And here's the twist: he didn't just accept this fight, he asked for it. Specifically, he requested to fight in Brazil in front of his family, friends, and thousands of fans who have supported him through every high and low of his career. For Oliveira, this isn't just about climbing back into the win column. This is about pride. This is about stepping into the octagon with his people behind him, feeling the roar of a crowd that's been with him since day one. Charles admits Raphael is no walk in the park. The man's a dangerous striker with slick movement, excellent timing, and a resume stacked with fights against elite competition. Figueiredo's kicks, speed, and ability to stay composed under pressure have made him one of the toughest matchups in the lightweight division. Oliveira knows all that, and it doesn't faze him, because right now, his mindset is bulletproof. That's the word he used, and when Charles Oliveira is happy, confident, and fully locked in, history has shown he becomes an entirely different kind of problem. His submissions flow naturally, his striking finds its rhythm, his pressure becomes suffocating. The moment he got confirmation that the fight was set, Oliveira says he immediately picked up the phone. First call, his family, to share the news and feel that emotional charge from the people who mean the most to him. Second call, his coaches to map out a plan for what is now one of the most important fights of his career. And here's something telling. Charles doesn't care that UFC Rio isn't a numbered card. He doesn't care about pay-per-view status or extra hype from a shiny event label. The motivation for him is already maxed out. Fighting in Brazil in front of a home crowd that will scream for every punch, every kick, every submission attempt. That's enough. That's more than enough. With the whole nation standing behind him, Oliveira says nothing can stop him on October 11th. Win or lose, this fight is about redemption, about heart, and about showing the world that Do Bronx is still one of the most dangerous men. Now let's talk about something Daniel Cormier just revealed, and it's the kind of behind-the-scenes detail that makes you realize how much goes on in the sport before the fans ever hear a word about it. DC says he got a call 2 months ago, yes, 2 full months before any official announcements, telling him that Khamzat might be out of his fight with Du Plessis. At the time, nothing had been made public. There were no rumors swirling, no media leaks, no hints from the UFC, just a quiet private call that instantly set off alarm bells in Cormier's head. This was supposed to be one of the biggest fights on the calendar, a high-stakes showdown with massive implications for the middleweight division, and now he's being told it might not even happen? That's a huge curveball. DC remembers exactly how that conversation went. He was told to start thinking about possible replacements. Names were floated, serious names. One of them was the top welterweight out of France, a dangerous, well-rounded fighter who could step in on short notice and still give Du Plessis a serious test. Another was Borralho, a rising contender with a unique style that could have made for a fascinating matchup. For Cormier, hearing those names was both exciting and unsettling. Exciting because in this sport, last-minute shakeups sometimes produce the most memorable fights. Unsettling because this was supposed to be Khamzat's moment. The UFC had been building toward it, the fans had been buzzing about it, and Du Plessis had been preparing specifically for it. To swap that out for an entirely different opponent, especially at the elite level, changes everything. But here's the part DC emphasizes. Even with all that uncertainty, even with those contingency plans quietly being discussed behind closed doors, the plan never really changed. It was always going to be Khamzat. Cormier says the UFC kept its focus on making that fight happen. They worked through whatever issues were there, whether it was injury concerns, scheduling conflicts, or other behind-the-scenes challenges that the public never saw. DC didn't go into detail about the exact reason Khamzat's spot was in question. He's not in the business of spilling everything, but he made it clear that at one point, the fight was far from a guarantee. And that's one of the realities of this sport that fans don't always think about. These big matchups we get excited for, they're often held together by weeks, sometimes months of delicate planning, adjustments, and yes, a little bit of hope. A single phone call can set off a chain reaction that changes everything. In the end, DC says he's glad it stayed the way it was supposed to. Khamzat versus Du Plessis is the fight everyone wanted, and it's the fight we're getting. But knowing how close it came to falling apart, that just makes it feel even bigger. Finally, we've got some big news about Arman, and this one comes straight from the man himself. According to Arman, Dana White personally told him that the plan is for him to fight Ilia next. That's right, straight from the UFC boss, not through rumors, not through managers, but directly from Dana. The MMA community exploded when they heard this. For months, the lightweight division has felt like a puzzle with too many missing pieces, and now, for the first time, it looked like things were finally starting to make sense. Fans immediately began speculating about how that fight would play out. The styles, the strategies, the stakes. But Arman knows better than to get carried away by words alone. Talk is one thing, action is another, and as Arman himself pointed out, there's still no official contract. Until the UFC sends him the papers, until the signatures are on the dotted line, nothing is set in stone. That's why Arman is keeping his options open. He's willing to fight someone else first, but only under one clear, non-negotiable condition. The UFC must guarantee that no matter what happens, he gets the next title shot afterward. No politics, no delays, no surprise matchups pushing him back in line. One of the names being thrown around is Dan Hooker. But here's the thing, Arman isn't particularly interested. He respects Hooker's recent run, he respects the effort and the wins, but in his eyes, that fight doesn't do much for his career right now. Beating Hooker doesn't push him closer to the belt in the way he wants. What does get his attention, though, is shutting up Justin Gaethje or Paddy Pimblett. Arman sees both as major sources of noise in the division, and he's more than happy to silence that noise. For him, Justin's grit, toughness, and knockout power make him a dangerous fight, but also a statement win if he pulls it off. Paddy, on the other hand, brings unpredictability, charisma, and a fan base that would make the fight massive. Arman would gladly take either fight if it locks in his path to the belt. Stylistically, many believe Arman might be the toughest challenge Ilia could face at 155. His relentless pace, suffocating pressure, world-class cardio, and high-level wrestling are weapons that could push Ilia to his absolute limits. And while Justin and Paddy both have their own dangerous skill sets, Arman's game is built to break opponents over time. Arman has also made it clear if the UFC offers him Justin or Paddy, he's ready to sign immediately, but he warns the UFC against booking something like Paddy versus Ilia, while leaving him out of the picture entirely. That's a move he wouldn't take lightly. He's already training twice a day, already in shape, and says he could fight as soon as September. In his mind, the path to the belt is right in front of him. All that's left is for the UFC to make the call, and when they do, Arman will be ready to walk into that cage and take what he believes is his.